do the intro, Steve?
Listen, I'll be the chair and I'll just host it for you, and then don't worry, it'll all be good. Andre and I will monitor the chat as well. I'll also ask people to raise a hand, Nathalie, which is, you know, if they want to say anything at one particular point.
Yeah.
Bring people in. But let me just go back to people.
Get my notes ready.
So what time is it now? It's 11:30. So I'll admit all, and then we'll bring more and more people in. So let's just come out of there and okay, admit all. Here we go. Good morning, Charlie. Good morning, David. Good morning, Emma. Good morning, Kate. Good morning, Bob. Good morning, Adrian. Good morning, James. If you've just joined, if you could mute, that would be great, just to cut out some background noise. Thanks, JQ. That's very kind. Let me just monitor the lobby. So, good morning, Eve. Good morning, Rachel. Good morning, Shay. We'll keep people coming in. That's good. That's good. That's good. If you've just joined, if you could mute, that'd be fantastic. Thank you very much. We'll wait another minute, I guess, just to allow some last-minute stragglers to come in. And make sure that everybody's, yeah, Stuart, if you I'm going to mute you, Stuart, if that's all right. So that'd be good. Thanks, Stuart. Very kind. Thank you very much. Got more people coming in. Andre, you're helping with the lobby on this one, aren't you? If that's all right. So we can do that. Okay. There we go. Good morning, Jane. Good morning, John. Good morning, Kate. Okay, 10:32. So we'll give it another 30 seconds, and we can then start and proceed. There we go, Martin as well. Good. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this week's Coffee Morning. I'm Steve Goddard, CEO of Painter and Playpen. We run these coffee mornings every week on a Tuesday to talk about hot topics and debate issues and come up with innovative ideas, which is exactly what Guy Opperman wants us to do. Today, I'm very delighted to introduce Nathalie Sims and Holly MaCarthur from LCP, who've got some results from a recent trustee survey, which we're very much looking forward to. And I hear it might be an inside track. We might be the first to hear it. So thanks for that. I've also bolted onto this session today Guy Opperman's comment regarding member-nominated trustees and whether they should stay or go, which is quite a hot topic. And I'm sure a few of you who are trustees, Sarah, for example, and Adrian, will have a number of views as to whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, that we get rid of lay trustees, get rid of member-nominated trustees, or do they add value? So that's the second half of the session. But as usual, we will start with the main event, which is Nathalie and Holly, and we will record. So JQ, Eve, Bob, you're all happy that we record? That's fine. So the recording is on. As usual, if you'd like to ask a question, then raise a hand, and you can do that in the reaction section at the top. To raise a hand to ask a question of Nathalie or Holly. We'll also open up the chat room, and if you want to make any comments or put a question in the chat room, then we can do that as well. So I will now pass over to Nathalie, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. This is my first coffee morning, so forgive me if I'm still quite new to the ways of working. I hope you'll all join in the discussion. Feel free to just raise your hand or just chip in. We like a good discussion, and Holly and I don't really want to bore you with our stats and all our details. Just a very quick introduction from us, and then we'll dive straight into it. My name is Nathalie Sims. I am a partner at LCP, head of strategic pension relationships, and I've set up LCP's professional trustee program about 7 years ago. It's grown a lot throughout the years, as you can probably imagine, because the industry has grown so much. To give you a flavour of the sort of things the programme does, we're a team of 8 people. We maintain relationships with all of the professional trustee firms. So that's 8 people plus all of the partners and all of my colleagues really at LCP who help maintain these relationships. And we run roundtable sessions with industry experts. We run LCP universities for mainly new joiners of these firms to give them a flavour on various topics. We run selection exercises for our clients mainly, but also non-LCP clients who are interested in appointing a professional trustee and help with what we call the matchmaking. So introducing them to suitable candidates. And we are about to launch our 2nd annual Sole Trustee survey. Hopefully we'll give you a bit of a sneak peek of the key results today. And the findings that from the results. It's probably going to launch end of this month, so you will have a few weeks of a head start.
I'll do a quick introduction now. So I'm Holly. I am actually an actuary in our scheme actuary practice, working on both trustee and corporate clients. Been at LCP for over a decade now. But I split my time. I also work on the professional trustee programme alongside Nathalie and the others. I have actually presented on one of these playpens before, really enjoyed it. It was on International Women's Day, so that was a great discussion. Unfortunately, don't normally work Tuesdays, so I've missed quite a lot of them, but really looking forward to today, and I hope we can have a really interesting discussion. I think around sort of the results of our survey, that hopefully there'll be some interesting views there, but also around the sort of role of the professional trustee more generally, and the sole trustee market and the sort of models and how that fits and how people feel about the way that the market is evolving. I thought it was worth a little recap at the start, because most of you will know what a professional corporate sole trustee is, which is the focus of our survey that we've done. But this is effectively where a professional trustee company becomes the sole trustee for a pension scheme. So they'll replace the whole trustee board. There's usually a main trustee director who will lead the appointment, but there will be support from others. And each of the different trustee firms have a slightly different approach to providing this service, and there's the sort of different models to these. I thought it would be worth kicking off with some of the sort of headline figures from our 2022 report, which will hopefully sort of lead some of the discussions today. So there's been about a 10% growth in the professional trustee market generally in the last year. So there was about just under 40% of schemes have a professional trustee, and now that's sort of nearer 45%. Of these, there are, I think it's about 15%, so a third of them are sole trustee appointments. The growth in the sole trustee appointments has been quicker than the professional trustee appointments more generally. So that growth's gone up 20% in the last year. So that's 120 new sole trustee appointments in the last year. And this is coming from schemes who already had a professional trustee and have switched to having a sole trustee, and also people who've just sort of done a big bang and said, let's get rid of the lay trustee board and replace it fully with a sole trustee. The sole trustee solution tended to be used historically for smaller schemes. We saw it with the sort of schemes with 100 million assets or below, who were sort of struggling with succession planning, so struggling to find people to fill positions on the trustee board. However, this year's survey has been really interesting, that we've seen a lot of the growth has been towards the top end of the market, so sort of bigger schemes deciding to go for a sole trustee solution. So last year there was only 16 schemes who had a sole trustee appointment with assets of over 500 million. This year, that's already up to nearly 30, so it's doubled schemes with assets over 500 million. And now the largest appointment for a sole trustee is a professional corporate sole trustee is 4 billion. So it's pretty hefty. It's one of the bigger schemes that we see. The other places where we're seeing a move to sole trustee appointments is larger schemes that have got an overseas parent. So they're looking for someone who's got good knowledge of the UK market. They want simpler governance, cost savings, and just the sort of overall end game planning for their scheme. The other reasons we're seeing move to sole trustee is sort of streamlining of services. So often a sole trustee will come in and a quarter of schemes with a sole trustee then group the service offering that they have. So they'll have sort of admin, actuarial, investment all by the same provider, looking for those efficiencies where they can. And we expect this trend is probably going to continue over the coming years. I think from the other side, so not just the sort of companies looking to replace boards with sole trustees, I think that the professional trustee boards themselves are now taking it a lot more seriously. So they are all developing their in-house solutions, thinking hard about the models and how to sort of offer this proposition. All of the firms now have a sort of dedicated head of sole trustees who runs this service as a key point of contact. And I think that helps with the sort of differentiation between the different firms, so you can see what you're getting from a different model. And then the final point I wanted to touch on was around D&I, which has become a huge focus, I think, across the pensions industry more generally over the past few years, and it's obviously fed through to the professional trustee firms as well. There is a bit of a shift away from the traditional, dare I say it, pale, male and stale, where there is a look towards getting younger trustees from different backgrounds. So there's a lot of recruitment in from not just actuarial backgrounds, in particular, a lot from the investment backgrounds now, covenant backgrounds, pensions manager backgrounds, just so you get a broader range of people within these firms. And also the male-female split has changed as well. So we're working towards 50-50. It's sort of 60-40 at the moment, but it's heading in the right direction and taking big strides. Nathalie, is now a good time to hand over to you to talk a bit about sort of the TPR stance on sole trustees?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just conscious that we've Bob, yes.
Hello, sorry, I thought I'd just ask something to, because something you just said, Holly, about streamlined services and having a single advisor to provide them all. I suppose talking of trustee boards generally, you know, there's a recognition that diverse trustee boards with a range of people with different skills on them will be more effective than ones where everyone's male, pale and stale. And I suppose if you've gone and appointed a professional sole trustee and then they've got their preferred advisors, I mean, you've really taken any diversity out of the equation, haven't you?
And that's one of the discussion points I was actually going to bring up later, and it's how you do the trade. No, I'm happy to have the discussion now. I think it's a really important one, and it's how do you get that diversity of thought when it is such a limited group of people? And we've asked that as part of our survey and sort of got ideas from the firms and how they manage it. There's lots of different approaches. Lots of them say that they do get the diversity of thought within their organisation. So you're appointing, yes, there's a named individual, but effectively there's a team behind it which are providing that diversity of thought. I personally think that having different advisors in many cases then helps, because you are getting different standpoints. You've still got the sort of concentration risk of the entire market, though, that if there's limited professional trustee firms providing the services and limited advisors who they're going to for the advice, you still might end up with pretty similar views of how people think that pension schemes should be run, rather than having someone who's come from I know that historically some of the most interesting points that are raised at trustee meetings and valuations, for example, comes from the person who's the member nominated trustee, rather than someone who's been sat doing pensions every day. It'd be interesting to hear other people's thoughts on that, though.
Thank you.
Maybe just worth adding, some we've heard of several ways of how to overcome the potential lack of diversity of thought. One is the different firms have different models and different remuneration structures, which encourage different kinds of behavior. So when sole trustee models are being established, if it is a firm that has a very collaborative approach, even though the sole trustee might only consist of 3 to 4 people within the one firm, everybody's encouraged to work together. If it is more of a sole trader approach, and there are a few of these firms out there where you have a named individual, probably a named second partner, if that, it is a little bit more challenging, because these people are probably less encouraged to work together just because they aren't on that particular account. So there it's really important to have more diversity of thought. And what we're also seeing is that there is quite a large dispersion between the different firms that prefer to streamline all of their advice. So all the different areas, the actuarial, investment and admin primarily with one firm. Some of them have a very high proportion, so about 80% of all of their sole trustee schemes have streamlined solutions in place, which we find really, really high. Some don't really worry about it at all and just do it on a needs-must basis and possibly switch advisors if it makes sense, but they don't really proactively seek out that better governance solution. So there is quite a large discrepancy there. And just very quickly commenting on Holly with the member nominated trustee input, couldn't agree more. And often the best comments and the best questions come from member nominated trustees, and also that knowledge that they have of having sat on that trustee board for many, many years and having seen the scheme throughout different scenarios. What sole trustees often put in place is an orderly transition period, so a long enough transition period to be able to pick up on these little nuggets of information. And in addition to that, they often offer member nominated trustees who are interested in staying on or providing that input in staying on as a consultative committee member. So they're not officially a trustee, they don't have the fiduciary duties that they would typically have as a trustee, but they can provide the input, they can attend trustee meetings and help get the sole trustee to understand that different perspective. Any other questions or comments, observations? I appreciate that we've thrown a lot of numbers and facts and figures at you from the report. Kate, yes, hello.
Hello. I'm a new member nominated trustee of a large scheme, and it's very interesting that you've just said they can add a lot of value in terms of the questions, in my case probably stupid ones because I'm quite new, and I've got a very different background, which is why I've been appointed. So why does the minister think we're so useless and we should get our P45?
I can't speak for the minister, but what I can say is, firstly, no question is a stupid question. Every perspective is useful, and the fact that you have been appointed is a good thing. And you know, so well done. And I hope you really enjoy that role, because it's an important one. I'd say that, you know, from your perspective, every member nominated trustee's perspective, adding that value and a different perspective is crucial. So we're by no means saying that sole trustee is the silver bullet. It is sometimes a way to get schemes to do things that the sponsor would like them to do if they are either short on time, really well funded, have a big project coming up. There are many, many reasons. We can go into the long list of reasons in a minute, but that is not to say that we, or in fact, even the professional trustee firms. I mean, I can see David on screen here, David Bricknam, so maybe he's got a view, but I doubt that all of the professional trustee firms are keen for all of their clients to become sole trustees, because firstly, I don't think it's that much fun for them to be only working with their own team members. I think there is quite a lot of enjoyment coming from working with member nominated trustees and a full trustee board, but also because the discussion and coming to important decisions for the scheme is that much more important and crucial when it comes to working with a full board. So I haven't really answered your question, Kate, but I've given a perspective. David, I've kind of forced your hand here.
That's all right. You know me. I'm more than happy to come in. But thanks for name checking me. My name's David Brickman. I joined ITS, Independent Trustee Services, as a professional trustee earlier this year. But previously, I've been working. I was at Tesco and previously Arian, which was the fund manager of the National Grid. So I've had experience on their with their trustee boards, both DB and DC. And I would say that for me, one of the key points is sole trusteeship works in certain circumstances, but not in all. And there are many cases where, as a member nominated trustees, bring things to and different perspectives to the table that you cannot get elsewhere, and they're invaluable. So I really think it is important to every scheme is different, and we need to recognise that and find the right solution for each individual scheme. I would say it's sort of in the case of sole trusteeship, there again, I work with a very, very collaborative firm where I have a large number of fellow directors with different experiences, diversity of thought and opinion, and a wealth of experience in different areas. And I think probably the key that the minister was sort of trying to get at was actually thinking about just the weight of regulation that we as trustees have got to get to grips with now. It is becoming a far more challenging task, I would say, than was the case in the past. And that's probably one of the reasons why we've seen more and more professional trustees to help with that. And that can be either as co-trustees supporting fellow trustees on the board, or it can be as a sole trustee solution.
Actually, I'll just interject there, Nathalie, and come back to Kate. Kate, as an MNT on that very issue, you are fully aware of all the risks and the liabilities and the burden of knowledge on you as an MNT. Do you think, have you gone into this eyes wide open? And again, first time we've met, Kate, so I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but you know, a lot of people on this call will know what the duties are of governing a very large scheme. Do you think you got enough information to as part of the recruitment package?
Yes, partly because the reason I applied is that I've been an employment tax lecturer for most of my career, and I was also the payroll manager at the sponsor that's where I was for 20 years, and therefore that's why I'm a member of the scheme and can be an MNT now. So absolutely, one of the reasons I assumed that they were keen to get me was that compliance is what I've worked on for all of my career, but also we're moving towards, as many schemes of maturity like ours, more pensioners than deferreds. We're just tipping over from one to another, so my experience of paying people is key. But I've also been very well trained in the last 6 months by the scheme and the executive team about my duties and responsibilities, and I've got an exam, my PMI exam, to take very soon now, having done the toolkit. So I'm under no illusions what I've signed up to, and rightly so, because I'm representing over 100,000 people, lots of whom are my friends, and who've supported my nomination. So it's absolutely serious, and I wouldn't have gone into it if I hadn't thought that. So yes, it's a very important role, and that, given the amount of training that's been offered to me and the perspective I can bring from my career, I think there is a role for member nominated trustees, and I hope we can convince whoever the minister might be, assuming the minister stays who he is, that we've actually got a role to play in the future. So yeah, we'll see, but I've got to pass my exam first.
Well, good luck with that, Kate. Yeah. We'll come to Adrian Fennell in a minute, just to come back to that one, Kate, because I think I think maybe what the minister's getting at is, you have got a number of fantastic credentials, experience of the employer, lots of training in compliance and governance and everything else. Maybe what the minister's getting at is, well, if you're making chocolates or making tires, or you're an estate agent in Exeter, do you have those tools to take on that full responsibility as a member nominated trustee? This is where the big debate is, and maybe I should get Guy on this at some point, but anyway, we'll come back to that. But I think maybe the angle is some people are less fortunate than you, Kate, where they haven't got that training or haven't got that knowledge. Adrian, sorry, let's go to you.
Yes, good morning. My name is Adrian Fennell. I'm an independent professional trustee with HS Trustees. I actually agree with everything that David said, and also Kate. Having said that, I also think that the minister is coming from the fact that as we get more and more schemes where there are no active members, it is that much harder to actually get a deferred or a pensioner to actually volunteer as a member nominated trustee or a member nominated director. It doesn't matter whichever terminology you use. And so therefore, the actual ability of that scheme to be able to comply with the legislation is that much degraded because they just don't have the level of or the numbers available. So schemes are looking in some cases to go to a sole trusteeship role simply to actually make sure that the schemes can actually run efficiently. And I think that's an important point. I agree, though, that MNTs do hold an important position, mainly because they actually have the ears of the members. They know what the members are. Like Kate says, you know, they've got friends there, you know, they're trying to support their pensions. So they know what the pensioners and all the actives, if it's still an open scheme, are looking for. So they add that added dimension, which the sort of company side directors or the independents that are on the scheme don't necessarily have. So I think there is a role for all types of people and all types of roles, but I do think that as we get more and more schemes that have no active members, it's going to be that much harder. And I think that to some extent is where the minister is coming from.
Okay, Adrian. Nathalie, back to you. Sorry, yeah, we've taken up a chunk there, but we may come back to a few of those issues later on. But anyway, yeah.
No, that's all fine, all fine. I was just going to add that as part of the survey and as part of the findings that Holly was just describing, we've had a little bit of input from TPR, a little bit of interest, particularly in the different sole trustee models in relation to the concentration of assets with the firms and individuals, just allowing us to ask a few pointed questions to understand potential conflicts of interest, if there are any, and if so, what professional trustees and sole trustees do about those in terms of the relationship with the sponsor to maintain a healthy level of independence, and also in particular within diversity and inclusion. Holly mentioned that we've seen some improvements already. We're continuing to see them, whether it's age, whether it's background. We're seeing quite a big shift as well from what used to be a hiring spree coming from the actuarial profession has now widened quite a bit to, as David mentioned, the investment side of things, where he's coming from, whether it's HR and finance backgrounds, and various other backgrounds. So it just helps with that diversity of thought, the different perspective of all these trustee directors that are now working at those professional trustee firms. So that is helpful. And then if there aren't any other questions about the survey itself and the findings, we could go into some of the reasons that we've identified about the pros and cons of sole trusteeship and professional trusteeship, but really, really keen to hear from you as well as to what you think about those.
That would be good, Nathalie. I think, yeah, it's for the people's benefit. Yeah, it would be really good.
Yeah, okay. So Kate and others, by no means is that lobbying for the use of sole trustee. Just to reiterate, every scheme has particular circumstances and sole trustee is only right in certain situations. However, when we asked our respondents of the survey and from various catch-ups we have and discussions with our clients, we tend to see that a big drive for sole trusteeship is due to speed of decision-making. Often that goes without saying, when trustee boards are struggling to make decisions or just dragging their feet. Staying abreast of all the regulation that's coming. So whether it's ORA, ESOC, the Pension Schemes Act, the new funding code, there's just a lot coming. And whilst sole trustee isn't, again, the silver bullet, but having somebody who understands all the regulation that's coming, could be a member nominated trustee, could be a professional trustee that is being hired to help really see the wood from the trees. Often that's a huge support. If and when the relationship between the sponsor and the trustee is broken, unfortunately, there are a few of those out there, and often an independent party can come in and just help mend that relationship. Sometimes we hear that often trustee advisors aren't as possibly honest about the fees they're charging or the service they deliver. So when we are on the corporate side and get asked to bring in a professional trustee, often that can help with benchmarking of advisor cost and the service received. If you think about a trustee board that's never really seen anything else, all they see is the service they receive from their advisors. So having somebody who can provide that perspective can be quite helpful, and can mean that trustee advisors don't need to review straight away. The professional trustee has that knowledge at hand and can just provide a quick benchmark as to whether the fees that are being charged are justified. And finally, when there are specialist projects that need to be completed, I think I hinted to those before, but if the scheme is well funded, wants to look into, for example, the insurance regime, or has a GMP equalization project coming up, having somebody who's done something like that before can help. Again, it doesn't have to be a professional trustee. It can be an MNT that has experience, but often those professional trustees have either done a buy-in, a buyout, a GMP equalization, or any other project where they can share some war stories, and it does mean that the trustees don't need to learn the hard way, but can use existing templates and processes in place. To add to, I think there was another comment, I think it was agents as well, where some trustee boards are retiring. So there is an issue about filling roles. There's a whole discussion around succession planning. So when succession planning is needed, often we get asked by the existing chair to help find his or her replacement. So that's always quite a nice exercise, because then we can run it alongside the existing trustees, and it makes our job easier, because we then need to find somebody the chair likes, the trustee board likes, the sponsor likes, and it all kind of, they're all working together as a joint working group. That's kind of our preferred way of working. So I'm conscious, again, I've given you a very long list of reasons to move to a sole trustee, but that's just anecdotally the reasons we have seen over the last few years.
Nathalie, just go back to costs. Does your survey include costs or a range of costs, or?
Cost professional trustees charging?
Yes.
It does. It gives a range of cost, and I'm happy to describe that range. It's always a difficult one, because the scope varies from scheme to scheme. It depends on how many hours actually that professional trustee is expected to spend on the scheme. However, the range also depends on the hourly charge out rate, and every firm has a different charge out rate. There is quite a big gap from the cheapest to the most expensive. So it's a tricky one. I mean, don't hold me to it. I always say that, don't hold me to it, because again, if you do run an exercise and you have a specific scope, that will depend, and it's a lot more. The scope we'd send out for the particular client, obviously, is a lot more telling than the number I'm going to throw in now. But the range is, for a typical, say, £250 million sole trustee client with business as usual tasks, so no lengthy projects coming up, is in a range of 25 to 40k a year. Again, that is a very wide range, and it very much depends on how many meetings are needed, how much prep is required, and how high or low the charge out rate is.
And Nat, sorry, I just wanted to jump in and just pull out that this is one of the sort of big differences we see between sole trustee and having a professional trustee on a board, is that the whole model for sort of providing the trustee service totally changes. So even when you have a professional trustee sit on a normal trustee board, it tends to be that you're still in the quarterly meeting cycles, sort of have subcommittees which may meet in between those. Whereas the sole trustee model, I think in almost all cases, unless the sort of employer has a strong desire to stick with the quarterly system, is to move to it being very much meetings when meetings are needed, advice provided when it's ready, and then discussed sort of on an ad hoc basis, and sort of less tied into a set cycle, which just means that the way of working changes quite a lot, and you get sort of cost savings in some areas, but then additional costs in other ways. I've noticed that we've got a couple of hands up. I know, Martin, you've been waiting patiently a while. Did you want to add?
No.
We can't hear you, Martin.
It doesn't say you're on mute, but we seem to not be.
Strange. In the chat room, Martin has put a comment regarding that the minister is very keen on the Australian system. Does anybody know what the role is of trustees in Australia? Because could we be heading in that direction? Do we have any knowledge in that area? Probably not. So, okay. Let's turn to a question from Shani McKenzie. Shani, do you want to ask your question?
Yep. Thanks, Steve. I was just wondering then, Nathalie, you outlined the difference between, or the range of fees for sole trustee services, but did your survey show any real difference between professional trustees when they're working on a board versus when they're working as a sole trustee?
Mm-hmm. So the survey itself didn't, because it was more focused on sole trustee, but I'm happy to comment on it here. So as Holly mentioned, sometimes the model through the sole trustee offering gets streamlined. And that in essence means that less hours are spent working on that particular scheme, which then means that intuitively you'd think that it becomes less expensive or cheaper. I think in practice, it is much of a muchness, and it all depends on what kind of model you're after. So if the model you're after is to have somebody chair a board, in a traditional model, sorry, Shani, and it's so going to from the traditional sense first, it will require trustee training. It will mean that more time is spent collecting views from the board, so the actual time spent is probably longer. However, in the sole trustee model, one pays for the time spent working on that particular client, so for the whole team, together with the time spent, so not just the lead, but also the team supporting, and the work is ongoing. Whereas in the traditional model, I'm not saying that professional trustees don't work on the client on an ongoing basis. However, it is more concentrated and more around those quarterly trustee meetings or, training sessions, etc. So I think that the difference is much of a muchness, to be perfectly honest. It all depends on the scope, upcoming projects, how much time is spent. Difficult to say.
Yeah, no, that was my sense. It's almost a more nimble structure of a sole trustee. It allows you to kind of do more in a shorter space of time, and there's that trade-off between them working with the board and the training piece. But just wondered if you had any stats behind it. Thanks very much.
And I think it's
stats.
Yeah, and I think it's worth adding also that a lot of the times when it moves to a sole trustee appointment, other services are sometimes sort of bolted on. So you quite often then will get scheme secretarial services provided as sort of part of the sole trustee appointment. So it'll be someone at the trustee firm doing those, where previously it may have been someone, say, at the company doing it alongside part of their day job. So it's then the sort of trade-off that they're maybe getting some time back that they can use elsewhere, but you might then see an additional cost as you're paying for a service that was previously done by someone sort of at the employer.
Understood. Thanks, Holly.
Just before we move on, does the survey also include a range of fixed fees versus time cost? Are quite a number of firms doing fixed fees for the core range? Is it 50-50? Is it mostly fixed? Because I'm sure a lot of employers, yeah.
Yeah, when we've been reluctant to add too many numbers, just because it isn't fair on the professional trustee firms to then have a number in a survey on one point in time, and they then get held to it when they have to respond to RFPs. I mean, having been on the other side, I would hate to be held accountable for a number that is a snapshot at one point in time. But just as a general observation, when we run these selection exercises for our clients, we tend to ask for a fixed fee to help our clients have, or the corporate, have a better understanding of what to expect. Anything that falls out of that scope, so if something comes up, if a trigger gets hit, if they decide to run a lengthy project, that is then a separate either time cost basis, or the sole trustee then gets asked to requote and give a rough indication or a range for the project.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Bob, you've had your hand up for a while. If you could unmute, Bob.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve. Yes, I just wanted to ask about conflicts of interest, because you did touch upon it, and it's something that the pension regulator has mentioned. I mean, isn't the sole trustee model just a sole trustee inherently conflicted, because the people that are paying their fees are the ones that they're negotiating with, either for funding or for appointment of the advisor that they want, or the approach that they want? And is that something that you comment on?
You've put me on the spot here, Bob, but yes, indeed. So I'm very happy to comment on it. And it's as you say, something that not just TPR is interested in. I think everybody's very interested in whether it actually that these sole trustees are conflicted. So just to touch on the survey, and we did ask that question specifically, and our respondents actually quoted that the most common reason for a retender of the sole trustee service is when views didn't align with the sponsor. Now, that might make you think that the sole trustee could be in the sponsor's pocket. However, what we have seen in practice is slightly different. So when sole trustees get appointed, because they know the subject matter so well, they are often quite comfortable to stand up to the sponsor. They're very aware of the fiduciary duty. We're all grown-ups in a reputable profession, so we all know what it means to have integrity, and at the end of the day, their job is to do what's best for members. So that is a top priority, and because they know the subject matter so well, they are happy to be quite robust when it comes to discussions with the sponsor. Now, again, there is a range of firms and different views, different individuals, different styles of negotiation. So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. But I hear what you're saying. I guess the jury's out whether a sole trustee can stand up to the sponsor and should.
And I guess it's worth raising, Bob, that just by having a sort of a lay trustee board with no professionals on, you still potentially have these conflicts if it's a small board. I'm just talking maybe about smaller schemes here where it's been a family-run business and the majority of the trustees are maybe people who are relatively high up in the company, taking up the member-nominated spots and the employer-nominated spots. When it comes to evaluation, you may be in a position where actually having a sole trustee or a professional trustee reduces the conflicts there rather than increases. But I do agree that there is that risk. And the stats, I always think that it can go two ways, that stat that most of the reasons that the retenders are because of lack of alignment of views. Does that mean that the sole trustees are doing a very good job at managing conflicts, so much so that the employers don't like it or may move? Or is it that, yeah, they are trying to find someone that will be in their pocket? And you can see it from both sides. Just picking up on Martin's comment in the chat. Yeah, I think that having so he said that about having a professional trustee on a board and the pros of having a sole trustee, rather professional trustee and the quick decision making. So he says that if you have a small nimble board, it might be better than a professional and sole trustee. And I think, yeah, if you've got a board that functions well and is doing a great job, you've got absolutely no reason. If it's not broke, don't fix it. I think that really holds true in this scenario. If you've got a great board that's working well, there's no issues, I think you stick with what you're doing. You don't need to do anything with a professional trustee potentially.
Yeah, but can I add in there, how long would that last for before it actually becomes unwieldy? All trustee boards work well for a period of time and then they start to go off the rails to some extent and then maybe go back on again, whereas the sole trustee might be a much smoother route overall.
Any comments, observations from the room?
Well, the diplomatic answer, of course, is that every scheme is different. People, will want to work as a board. If it functions well, fine. Some employers view, the sole trustee as a route to reducing risk, I guess, to a point. and to focus on the flight plan. I mean, most of us know about flight plans and the wonderful world of deficits and repayments and buy-in and buyout. So maybe that's a driver, but it is very much case-by-case basis. And it does come back to a point with Kate's role as an MNT. It's some employers will benefit from the experience that somebody like Kate's got to support even the professional trustee in their role, because there will be nuances in the scheme that the professional trustee may not know about, or there'll be some skeletons in the cupboard, that the professional trustees may not know about yet. Yeah, I think the MNT can add value where appropriate, and hopefully, Kate, you'll agree with that.
I think it's very true what you say about knowing the knowledge of the company. Although, of course, the company has changed enormously in the time since I was there, but still the culture is something that I understand for being there for such a long time. So I think that is a helpful perspective as well.
Yeah. Okay. Alan, you've got your hand up. Do you want to ask a question, Alan?
Yes, a couple of questions. One, linking back to your point about professionals and integrity, certainly everybody in this call falls in that category, but does anybody actually monitor that? Is there a professional body, exams, certification?
Sorry, I'm just waiting for you to finish because I can't see you.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Yes, finish now.
Okay, great. So the professional body that monitors, hi, I can see you now. The professional body that monitors the sole trustee and the professional trustee market is called the Association of Professional Pension Trustees, APPT. It is a collection of firms and individuals who all come together with various boards, various responsibilities, and they have set a standard for the sole trustee market. In that, they encourage regular review of advisors. They encourage various other standards that you're referring to make sure that the integrity is maintained. They hold each other accountable for it. Now, bearing in mind, this is not a regulatory body. This is a body of individuals and firms coming together, which is different to, say, an FCA overseeing the financial services market. But it's still better than not having a body at all.
Okay. And I guess something
with regards to exams, the APPT and the PMI have exams, and I think, Kate, you mentioned that you're about to hopefully pass one of the exams that there are 3 different exams set by the PMI and APPT together. They run by the PMI then essentially, and they then, once those 3 exams have been passed, one becomes an accredited professional trustee. Those exams cover technical skills and soft skills as well. So to help really whittle through, help the individual really understand what's required to be a professional trustee. Now, the jury's out there. I haven't passed the exam myself, so it's probably helpful for those who have to comment on what these exams are like. Some claim they're too easy, some claim they're too hard. I think it's a good thing that there are exams out there. I know that TPR are interested in getting some feedback as to whether exams should be harder or not. But I think generally having those exams is a good thing.
Sort of a follow-up question is, I think linked to all that sort of regulation part of it is, what happens if something goes terribly wrong? Does the sole professional trustee model protect the scheme members more or less than the traditional model?
Something goes wrong in what way?
I don't know. If nothing ever went wrong, we wouldn't need trustees at all. But I don't know. The extreme example is just, I don't know, some complete negligence and totally inappropriate investments taken out, which lose a fortune.
Gosh. David and Sarah, you're probably best placed to answer. Sarah, I noticed you have your hand up. So a professional sole trustee typically only gets appointed as part of a firm. That firm has indemnity insurance and has checks and balances in place to ensure that individuals are not going rogue, essentially. If something was to go wrong, let's hope it doesn't. I haven't seen it happen yet, but
And I think it's a good time to raise as well, even with the sole trustee model, it's not just a person on their own. I know a lot of the firms have special processes and procedures in place. So if it's a decision that's either very material in terms of monetary amounts or could have a big impact on scheme members or sort of quite a controversial one, they have a sort of an internal panel in many places where they go and take these decisions to, which will be made up of more than 2 people. That will be a group of people and potentially experts in certain areas that they can run through and make a decision in a similar way that maybe a trustee board would, and potentially with a wider ranging skill set, because they might have a pool from a sort of different pool of people.
Yeah, and I think also quite a lot of sole trustees will have a primary lead and a secondary support. You know, there is the odd prospect of holidays and illness and all that sort of stuff. So there's always a primary and a secondary. So I think the APPT has guidance on how to deliver that. One is not enough. That cannot happen. So it's trying to reduce risk in that space. Sarah, you've had your hand up for some time. You are a trustee. Interesting session so far.
Yes, and thank you, Nathalie and Holly, for sharing those results with us. I was just picking up on the comment that you made, Nathalie, on the exams, just to give my thoughts on the exams, which I appreciate may be slightly different to what everybody else thinks. But me personally, I don't like exams. I was very happy to get out of school. I never had a desire to go to university. I just wanted to learn on the job and to build up my knowledge as I go, which I have done. So when the exams came out, I was actually disappointed, because they make me nervous and they make me anxious. And I'm not afraid to say that when I sat the APPT exam, the technical one, I failed it the first time. And that's not to say that I can't do the job. I can do the job, and I've been doing the job for 19 years, but put me in an exam situation, it's completely different. It's a little bit like learning to drive a car is the analogy that I use. When you're in a certain car and you're asked to do a parallel parking, and you're told when this sticker on the back of your window gets to this point of the car, you turn your wheel halfway around, and then when your wing mirror gets here, you sort of taught the information to learn to pass, but doesn't necessarily mean you can do the job. So exams for me, I didn't like it. Just a comment on the soft skills exam. I mean, the soft skills exam was a multiple choice question. I'm still a little bit baffled how you can test somebody's soft skills by asking multiple choice questions, but I hope that's a helpful insight to my at least personal thoughts on exams. I appreciate everybody's different, but that's my thoughts.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. That's very humble and honest of you, as expected. So that's really good. Let me just, sorry, Henry Tapper's just finally joining, which is good. So that's really good, Sarah. And I mean, from a member-nominated trustee point of view, again, there are diversified scenarios there, aren't there? There are people that will be like Sarah, who will be very nervous and will have, the shakes and won't want to do exams. But equally, there'll be people that will pass with flying colours. Do we think, and Nathalie and Holly, I guess is a question, do we think that the standard of questions and exams are exactly the same between APPT and PMI? That's another question I'd like to ask you. What are your thoughts?
My understanding is, again, I haven't taken them, but my understanding is they are, because PMI are the ones that run them. So APPT and PMI used to actually work together a few years ago and have then split subsequently. But the actual exam is actually set by the PMI. So I believe that the exams are exactly the same.
There's no dilution, there's no difference in the angle of questioning and the knowledge that you need. Right, okay, that's good. Yeah. Cool.
And sorry, I can't remember who asked the question. I think it might have been Alan, about the making sure that trustees have the sort of knowledge. And I know that we are asking the question, so we asked a question as part of our survey on this point. So we asked the different firms whether they think that the exams and the sort of accreditations are enough and give them the sort of level that they need to be able to do their job. They answered yes, which I guess in many ways you'd expect, but lots of them did expand on the answers, saying, okay, yes, there are these sort of exams and the accreditations, but there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. So we do sort of fortnightly technical sessions, and there's all these ongoing things behind the scenes that mean that it's not just the exam and they're done. There's a sort of continuous professional development that's happening. And David, your hand's gone up, so you'll probably be able to expand on what happens in practice.
Yeah, and I'm one of the people who's just gone through the process, and I'm also going to be sitting one of the exams later this month as well. There is a lot of training for me, and I really get what you say, Sarah, about exams, because I hate exams. I didn't want to sit another one after I left school, but it's one of those things you have to do. Unfortunately, we're having to do. For me, it's not about the exam result, it's about the training, and that's more important than anything else. And what I would say, if I think there's something lacking in the system at the moment, it's probably the the training over the soft skills, because there isn't I don't think there's as much of that as there is geared towards the formal part of the trustee toolkit. So I think we could probably improve there in general. I mean, the other thing I would say about sort of the exams, if we have to have a way of making sure that people have knowledge. So at the moment, this is the best we've got. It would be great to improve it, and I know they're looking at improving at ways of improving it. So I'm sure we can always do better. But ultimately, to me, I don't like the sort of the knowledge-based tests where it's particularly a memory test. Because the right answer, if you're not sure, is go and ask. I mean, I've worked in the financial industry and investment for nearly 30 years, and the right answer, if I don't know something, is go and ask my compliance officer. It's don't assume. And that should be the same every time. Go and ask. And as professional trustees, I've got a firm behind me with lots of people who have that knowledge, who I can go and ask if I'm not sure.
Cheers, David. Thanks. Adrian, you got your hand up as well?
Yeah, there's also the requirement, both for the PMI and the APPT, that you have to do a minimum of 25 hours of training, so it's sort of continuous training. So in other words, that's not just reading magazines and things, it's actually attending seminars, webinars, and everything else that goes around it, which for a lot of us is actually relatively easy. I've already done mine this year already. But for a lot of MNDs, for example, it could be quite a lot harder for them, for example. But the idea is obviously not just to take the exams and to qualify at a particular point in time, but is to demonstrate that you do continue with your education in the pensions fund and keep up with as much of it as you possibly can.
Yeah, no, that's good, really good. Henry Tapper, I'm going to bring you in now because you're a latecomer to the party, Henry, and I know you've been busy elsewhere. Henry, you have a number of political contacts, and I think Kate Upcraft earlier is one of our member-nominated trustees who's just been appointed by a very large scheme. And there are concerns regarding Guy Opperman's plan to get rid of MNTs. Do you know why, Henry? What are the drivers for Guy's planning on getting rid of MNTs?
Well, what he said to me was that pensions were too important to be put in the hands of amateurs.
Okay, Kate, would you say you're no, it's an unfair question because Henry, you haven't heard Kate's fantastic resume, but Kate has just become an MNT and she's done compliance for 20 years. But is that actually what, Kate, what do you think about that?
I'm sure Henry thinks I'm an amateur, and I would absolutely agree with him. But I suppose the thing about amateurs is they sometimes do ask the elephant in the room question, don't they? And there's always a place for that, I think. So I'm trying not to be an amateur, and I hope to pass my exam. But I wouldn't discount the role of the amateur in getting to the nub of things sometimes.
I wouldn't want to be considered Guy Opperman in this debate. I have simply translated what he told me. But yeah, I think there's a big argument that diversity in trusteeship is important, provided that it doesn't create a negative impact on decision making. And clearly, the pensions minister wants decision making in one direction and one direction only, and that is towards the consolidation of small to big schemes. So I suspect that his objection to MNTs is that they may be holding up that bigger purpose. But that's only speculation.
Okay, Henry. Yeah, appreciate that. Ian, you've got your hand up. I'm conscious of time, but yeah, what's your question, Ian?
Just really building on that one, I think I know Henry is just repeating a message, and I know Henry well enough to know that's probably not his personally held views. I think we've all, all of us who've been in the industry long enough, we've all come across the member nominated trustees, and whether they are amateur or not, the member nominated trustees who take the role seriously and put the effort into learning about what it is they're doing, understand the role that they're taking on. I think it would be a huge loss to the industry if MNTs were got rid of. That's my personal view. I think consolidation into experts. I don't sort of subscribe to the view that we shouldn't listen to experts. Clearly, otherwise I'd be doing myself out of a job. But actually having the challenge, having people that actually come back and say, hang on a minute, does that make sense? Who are members who think about it, and I think they are that much closer. It was mentioned earlier, they're that much closer to the members and to what the members are thinking. I certainly wouldn't wish to work in an industry where we've got rid of MNTs. I think that would be a very sad move for us all. And Martin, I've just spotted your comment. I completely agree. I was going to make the same comment, but you got there first.
Yeah, an interesting one. For those that haven't seen the comment, we should remove all MPs and only have professional civil service. So there we go. Similar analogy, but there we go. Nathalie, Holly, that's been a fantastic session. I really appreciate that. When is the survey actually coming out? Because as we suggested earlier, this is a sneak preview, which is very kind of you. When are you releasing it, and can we get hold of it? Or does it?
Absolutely, yeah. So firstly, thank you so much for everybody for a great discussion, everybody's input, really appreciated. The survey is just being finalised, and we're hoping to launch it end of this month. So it will be available on all the usual channels, social media, the LCP website. You probably receive it in your inbox as well through our central mailing list. But if you haven't received it and want to get hold of it, please do email us. You can find our details on the website, or happy to share them with you. Holly, myself, or anybody else within LCP will be able to share it.
Fantastic, that's brilliant. And I really appreciate your time and your input this morning. And I'm sure everybody will join me in saying thank you for a great session. Next week we have Philip Boyle talking about drawdowns, flex first and fix later, he's called it, but I'm trying to find out what that's all about. So hopefully you can join us next Tuesday. If you're not a member of Playpen, please join. If you are a member of Playpen, please share the Playpen experience on the Invite Friends tab. We are now issuing how to every Wednesday. So how to blog, please blog. How to connect with other members and communicate with other members, that's very important. And really appreciate everybody's input this morning, and really good discussion. And as we usually say, let's pray for peace in the East. So really appreciate everybody's input, and thank you for your time. And if you're going to the PP Show Awards tonight, have a great time. Try not to drink too much. And let's hope that Playpen gets an award, because we're in for an award, aren't we, Henry? So yes, let's hope we get an award. Okay, thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day, and have a safe week. And we'll hopefully see you at the next event on Tuesday, the 20th, I think it is. So thank you very much indeed. Thanks everyone, and enjoy. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Cheers, thanks. Bye.